Well, as you join, say hi. We can see all the comments. We'd love comments as you jump in, questions, anything like that. But yeah, we are here to talk about the fun job market. And I figure we could all introduce ourselves a little bit if you haven't met or chatted with any of us. But I am Connor Duffy. I've been with Celarity for almost 6 years now. I've been in recruiting for almost 10, which is just weird to say, but absolutely love what I do. I am the manager of client experience here, and I work directly with both Abby and John.
Awesome. I can go next. I'm one of the managing partners here at Celarity. John, I've been here about 14 or 15 years now. And I work closely with Connor and Abby on the sales side and also on the marketing side.
Love it. Yeah. And I'm Abby. Been with Celarity for coming up on 5 months, I think. Pretty close, but been in recruiting for 7-ish years. And honestly, still learning a ton from both of you. So love that. Appreciate it.
And we're learning
from you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hey, Sandra, Eric, thanks for saying hi. Yes, we are looking forward to talking about trends too. So I think that's a perfect way to transition into the first thing we kind of thought would be the best to start with. And that is, what does some of the data show? What are those Bureau of Labor statistics? And John, I know you're pretty plugged in on looking at a lot of those things. So I'll kind of kick you off with some data and things of that nature to show the people.
Yeah, happy to take the boringest part with the numbers and stuff. For those that don't know, so we do marketing creative specific recruiting. So we do consultant placement as well as perm hiring within marketing creative positions. The numbers that we're looking at are just total across the board, everything job related, hires, quits, job openings. So the interesting thing on this and how to read this, it's a percentage of total employment. And this is the government data, GLS, JOLTS data. So what we're basically seeing right now is that the hire rate, that yellow line on each of these graphs is actually the 2019, so pre-pandemic year average. So if you can see on there, the hires moving left to right is below where we were at pre-pandemic. Quits, so people leaving jobs on their own, is below 2019 and actually closer to like 2016 levels at this point, 2017 levels. And then job openings total are still above pre-pandemic as a total. But if we want to zoom in on the next one, specifically within marketing, media and communications roles, which is a lot of our audience and it's what we do. And this is Indeed's job posting data, so it's not apples to apples, it's not the government data, but this is Indeed posting. The way to read this one, so 100 is actually the starting point back pre-pandemic, January 2020. We are below that level right now. So we're about 10-ish%. You can see there's a jump every year at about January. People take the holidays off and then they post again. So it kind of jumps and then kind of goes back to the new normal. But as you can see, the last few months, it's kind of leveled within marketing and communication roles. So we're kind of just seeing the same amount of roles, but less than the last few years.
Yeah, and these numbers are really interesting because I think it plays into what people are feeling in the job market, right? Like you mentioned, John, the job openings are in totality, take away marketing creative, are higher than what they were back in 2019, say pre-COVID. But in the marketing space in particular, it feels like they are down, and your data kind of shows that. And both myself and Jamie, someone who kind of heads up our marketing and works with you, John, on that side, we both did polls on LinkedIn, just asking people, how do you feel about the year ahead? My poll in particular was certainly not a perfect poll. I only gave two options, optimistic and pessimistic. And I was actually surprised to see, the reason I did that too with just two answers is because I really wanted to hopefully get people
force people
to pick one. And 33% picked pessimistic. And that is way more than I would have ever thought. I feel like in general, people look at the job market in a glass half full sense, but people they're feeling those job openings being a little low. They're not seeing it. They're seeing more and more people. What seems like, as we've talked about a little bit, layoffs as well. And then Jamie's poll was kind of in the middle. There's 20% really thought it looked great and bright. 57% said I'm cautiously optimistic, And then the rest below that, so another 20-25% said they do not feel good. So those numbers kind of tie into that public sentiment, which I think is a really unique piece, especially as we meet with so many different individuals in this space. So Abby, I mean, and kind of your thoughts too, in all the meetings that you've had, and I think you bring a really unique perspective because you're currently in marketing creative in that hiring space, but you also have done several other industries from your last role. So I think your perspective is really unique in what you've seen, over the last couple of years as well. But yeah, what do you think about public sentiment? What are you hearing from managers and things as you have these conversations?
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels like very similar from company to company, right? It feels like I'm kind of feeling the same thing. So, I mean, that's good that it feels the same, right? From there to here. But it's interesting because one other thing I thought I'd mention is, looking at the data, we're not that far off from pre-pandemic. But I think it's recency bias that we had this boom in 2021 that in our minds, things feel worse or feel bad right now, but really it's because we're probably comparing it to what we felt in 2021, which was this insane boom and, job openings and things like that. So just interesting to think about that. But I mean, we're still hearing that people want to hire, right? In all my conversations, it's like, we want to hire, we might not have the green light. I think, John, we were talking about that earlier, but, they still want to hire and there's still that need. So it's just interesting to kind of compare what we're hearing with the data for sure.
Yeah. A lot of the conversations, Abby, that we were talking about, right? A lot of the managers have open headcount. They want these roles on their team. They have the budget planned out. They just haven't gotten the full thumbs up yet. And they're just kind of waiting more or less.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. It's really unique. And also if you have questions and comments, please send those off as you think about them, as you get them. Obviously we want to answer questions that you have. We want to talk about what you are hoping to hear about. So please send those off. We can see all the comments and everything. But yeah, I think I've mentioned this to both you and both you, Abby, and John, and maybe a few other people. It feels like where we're at based on all these conversations, because I'm having those same thing. All those leaders and managers are like, I want headcount. I'm trying to plan for headcount, but we're just kind of figuring out where it's going. It feels like hiring budgets and budgets in general are being looked at from companies almost like 401ks, where it's like, I can't pull out right now. If we pull out the money, we're going to pay the big penalty, and it's just not the right move. And they're waiting and waiting to see that job market kind of flip in totality from their competitors or whoever. And then everyone's gonna be like, oh, you know what? It is a safe time. I'll borrow kind of for myself and hire for the future growth in that sense. That's what we're seeing. Every manager is just, I would love to find some people. So I can't always stay like that, right? You need human capital in order to better your product and your services and everything down the road. It's just this interesting spot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And to back that up, Connor, too, if everyone's expecting, the Fed to cut rates, like why spend money now when you can borrow cheaper and 3 to 6 months? That's kind of the sentiment we're hearing, is people are just waiting to pull the trigger on this stuff. So I think that, and you mentioned too, even the size of companies, it's been a big difference too in what you're hearing, Connor and Abby.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that, about what company sizes are hiring, what are kind of in this freeze mode we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we were talking about this earlier, Connor, is, we are seeing kind of this pause where it feels like everyone's kind of on the edge of their seats waiting. But then a couple months ago, we saw an opening with a large med device client and then saw 2 more within a day, so it's like they're talking to each other, kind of seeing and holding to see what the others do, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And then flip side, like you mentioned, John, a lot of the roles, like maybe those larger companies, which is where typically the vast majority of job openings come from, they may be a little bit lower, at least right now, but smaller mid-sized companies feel like they're hiring, like, I don't want to say gangbusters, but that's a big chunk of the roles we're seeing. These smaller to mid-sized companies are growing their teams. They're seeing a really unique opportunity where there have been some layoffs to pull in some really great talent from larger companies or people who normally go after those, the fortunes and things, because there's a lot of resources and a lot of really valuable things, but mid-sized companies are seeing a really unique opportunity. So that's what we're seeing.
That's what we're seeing that internally too. Like you were saying, basically 50 plus employee companies are still hiring, still moving ahead. but it's a lot of the Fortune 500s that have really slowed quite a bit.
And that's what the data is based off of too, right? Are a lot of these Fortune 500. So we're seeing this data that says, we're holding or whatnot. And on our end, we're seeing hirings. We're like, where's the difference? What's happening here? So
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, job searching is obviously a little unique right now. And I mean, we're talking to various leaders, various individuals who have either been affected by layoffs or just potentially looking for a new role. And there's the AI piece. There's the lack of job postings in marketing. So, John, I know you've been meeting with a ton of different leaders who are in transition and things of that nature over the last few months. How's that been for them? Like, what's the job searching part of all this look like?
Yeah, traditionally for the higher level roles, it's a longer search process in general. I did see a stat out there. The average time to hire is like at an all-time high that this one company was tracking for the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. So if you are out there job searching and you're like, wow, things seem to be moving slow, the data backs that up. That is exactly what is going on. So at a higher level stuff too, I've seen a big trend for higher level people getting more into consultant work, doing 20-hour plus. Fractional is a big term that's being thrown around a lot the last couple of years. Fractional leadership type roles that, again, these mid-sized companies, mid to small size companies is where a lot of that activity is happening, and a lot of stuff that I've seen higher level people get projects in and stay busy. But yeah, as far as like the larger companies, it has been slower for sure on that front, and the hiring process has been a lot slower. Companies are taking their time.
Yeah. I think introducing, like, again, AI and all that piece, and I'm certainly not qualified to talk about AI in general, but another unique thing too is, as we've talked to some of these leaders, I know we had a roundtable with a roughly 10 who are in transition. We just wanted to get everyone to network and just talk about the best routes. A lot of those people had never had to search for a job in their life. It was, they'd get referred, they'd get pulled, they'd get networked in, and now we're seeing that slow piece, like you mentioned, John, that has had to have a lot of people figure out, okay, what's the best route here? And obviously networking in this increasingly technical world, it feels like we're almost getting back to a human element when it comes to networking and getting to know people and have coffees, because I think all three of us are seeing this. More and more people are just wanting to chat, just wanting to meet for coffee. Yeah, exactly. And that's been super refreshing for me. And I know you both have loved it as well, but it's been quite the change in the last bit on that end. Not sure if you've seen more insights on that.
Abby, you've been seeing a lot of that same trend too recently, right? With a lot of former clients you've been talking to that have made moves, whether they couldn't get the resources on their team or you want to expand on what you've been seeing out there, like we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting because I think it pairs well with, like, we're seeing that these companies aren't really getting the green light to hire. And a lot of the people I'm talking to are just kind of deciding, like, hey, I'm kind of ready to move on because I'm not getting that support, and so they decide, hey, I'm going to move on, and are moving into, like you said, John, those consulting roles and taking that on just to be, a little less strategic and just more tactical day to day. And so it's interesting because that's not something I've seen in the past, is like folks leaving without something else lined up by choice. And I've seen it quite a bit in the last few months and had conversations with people who've done that. And it's, a lot of it is because they're not getting that, hiring support on their team, that budget approval for new hires. So very interesting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting juxtaposition to find themselves in when it comes to searching and then also hiring. And then I see a quick question too from Gene on perm companies looking like they're waiting on perm hires and those direct FTEs. What's their perspective on hiring contract until perm hires become a little bit more prevalent? And I mean, I don't know what you two have seen, but I personally am seeing an apprehension to both, almost, in a sense. And I think it's more the headcount piece. It just plays in the budgetary restrictions. I am, over the last few months though, I think on my desk and my clients alone, we're seeing a little bit more contract to hire. They're kind of like, let's try before you buy type of thing, which I think could be good for a candidate, for a person looking as well. You get to get a feel for the company. But that is a trend that I'm starting to see breadcrumbs where that could be the next phase of this job market. I'm not sure what you two are seeing.
No, I agree. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, I feel like it's potentially a reaction to the boom of perm hiring in 2021. And, that kind of backfired, right? In some ways for some companies. So they're leaning on contract for sure. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing more than I ever have.
Yeah, that's what our Q4 numbers at Celarity kind of back up was a little bit of a flip in the demand from perm to contract. We had one of our stronger quarters in contract placements last quarter that we've seen in the last year and a half. So that was definitely a trend we're seeing internally for sure.
Yep. Starting to, like we mentioned, kind of flip maybe towards that part that you're seeing, Gene. That seems like it could be where it could go for the next few months. And then Amy, hi Amy. Always good to see you and see your name, chat with you. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Hiring managers are crazy busy, especially this time of year. And that leads to that maybe a little bit longer term or longer search that John was talking about, when it takes a little bit longer for the job to fill. And that's where things are getting a little bit longer in that sense. And I think that goes to show sometimes the teams, right? Like there's not enough time to interview. You have a lot of projects, you have a lot to do. It's hard to get taken away from that when obviously hiring is so important. But if you have this goal that needs to be hit today, tomorrow, it's really hard to kind of get the schedules ironed out and all that, especially when you have a bigger team. So I completely empathize that piece, Amy, and it's tough. It's really tough.
Connor, to even back that up and kind of hit on Eric's comment too about ATS and stuff. This time last year, a little bit before that, a lot of cuts were made in HR teams. So a lot of recruiters, just because hiring wasn't expected to keep up with the crazy pace the previous couple of years. So I do feel like those teams are understaffed as well. And to what Eric might be feeling from an ATS standpoint, I know a lot of AI tech tools are being used to help sort through resumes and summarize stuff. And because a lot of those recruiting teams are short people, so I think it might be a little bit of a bottleneck, also mixed in with these tools aren't perfect. And I know there's a lot of frustration on the job seeker side as well, on the hiring side, of using these tools and getting better at using them, because it's not perfect. It doesn't know, especially within marketing, creative type roles. Like it's, a marketing communications manager could be many different things to many different companies. So it's kind of hard to, tell an AI tool what exactly, is a good resume and what isn't. So a lot of qualified people end up kind of getting not even reviewed by a human being sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And then another good piece to touch on in this crazy job market, especially since COVID kind of changed the working environment in a lot of ways. And Heather touched on this. Hey, Heather, good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you at Ad Bowl in a couple of weeks as well. What are you seeing? And Abby, this could be a good one for you, obviously being, kind of switching jobs yourself in the last handful of months. What are you seeing in remote and hybrid options from employers, and then vice versa? What are job seekers like? Are they looking for only remote, looking for hybrid, on-site? What's that? Kind of what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think we're seeing definitely a push for hybrid / on-site for sure. I mean, in the past even 3 months, it's been kind of a crazy shift. I know, Connor, you're feeling that too. But I don't think that's really shifted with job seekers. They're definitely still looking for remote. So it's been tough, I think, on our end to, find folks who are willing to go on site.
Especially 5 days a week, right, Abby?
Yeah. That's been definitely a struggle. I think there's some people who are definitely open to hybrid, flexible schedules, but there's definitely contrast between, companies wanting people on site and people just not really wanting to do that just yet. So it's been interesting to kind of maneuver around that.
Yeah, and the biggest. Go ahead.
Wow. I was just going to say real quick, we all had this working theory too, that a lot of these companies who are forcing kind of the more aggressive return to office 5 days a week may want some people to quit. The quit rate, like we went over at the beginning, is pretty low. So people aren't leaving jobs. So that also might be a motivation slightly for some of these companies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then on the job seeker side, I think we're seeing more and more people be open to it. 2 years ago, it was, I want remote. I'm never going in, and I just don't want it anymore. That was kind of the big sentiment. Now it's just flexibility. People, we're adults, right? Like people want to be want to be trusted. People want to be valued. They have a life outside of work that they want to be able to do, but they're still going to get their work done. So we're seeing things like Tuesday, Thursday on site, at different companies. But those Tuesdays and Thursdays, everyone's there. They're very intentional. We're going to get your meetings out of the way on Tuesday or Thursday, so you can focus on that individual work. Yeah, meetings, trainings, whatever that is, and get those. Then you can have your individual work and that stuff you really got to grind on at home or wherever you like. It's having an intention behind going on site. So it's certainly flipped, but I do think more and more people are at least open to the idea of hybrid. I mean, it's nice to see your coworkers. I know when we go in, when we're all in, it's a super fun time, and we get a lot done, but we also just have a good time. I know a lot of us are playing pickleball together at our new Lifetime spot, which is great. But the remote hybrid piece is interesting, to say the least. But I mean, we've talked about a lot, and gosh, we could talk about this forever. I mean, I know sometimes we'll go in and we'll talk about trends and everything like that. And but I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Is there any other parting thoughts that you or John, you and Abby yourself too, have anything else you want to touch on? And of course, everyone, please connect with us offline. Send us a comment, send us an email, anything along those lines. We'd love to have coffee, chat, be as helpful as possible, especially in this super weird market. But anything that you think we missed, Abby, John, you think we're pretty good for now?
No, I think we covered the bulk of it. I was reading something earlier I thought was super interesting, that with all, even with some of these drops we're seeing, wage growth has still been like steady, which is interesting to think about. So, just because hiring is cooling doesn't necessarily mean that companies are not thinking about that. So just something I saw and appreciated, that, that can still be kind of a consideration. But no, I feel like we touched on kind of the big things that we're seeing.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great point, Abby, to bring up. I mean, obviously there was this incredible wage growth in like 2021, and we're seeing it stabilize a bit from those levels, but overall it's still going up. And I agree, it's great to see, especially with prices and inflation kind of where they're at. It's awesome to see companies being very cognizant of that as they plan and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I would just kind of add to like what Abby was saying earlier, we are returning to kind of more pre-pandemic level stuff. It feels like a slowdown, because I mean it is from a crazy 2 years, 3 years of hiring. But the levels are basically where they were at pre-pandemic as of right now. I know in January, I mean, there's been a ton of headline news of tech layoffs again, across the board. Still looking at the data from what we're seeing from the government, layoffs and stuff are still below pre-pandemic levels. I mean, obviously we don't have January's numbers yet. But it's just interesting to note that stuff, that, it's kind of I hate saying these terms, right? Like the new normal. But it is kind of getting back to a little bit more of a normal state with some of these things. And I would also say, like, with the ATS AI stuff, nothing beats in person, nothing beats networking and knowing people. So if you are out there job searching, you're frustrated, it sucks. Definitely understand your pain. But nothing beats just reaching out to people. People love to help. Don't be afraid to ask for help from people. I've just noticed in my time doing this job, people just love to lend a hand if you ask for it.
You're not alone. People do like to help, employed, unemployed. People are generally out there to be helpful. It's really, I mean, it's fun to do that. That's kind of why we do what we do, but not just staffing as well. We've found that people love to help. So you're not alone. If you're searching and if you're hiring and you want to hire, you're not alone as well. It's a unique market. And everyone, thanks for taking the time. I know it's over lunch. It's always fun to just chat about this. And again, I just can't emphasize enough. If you have any questions, give myself, John, Abby, anyone at Celarity a shout. We would love to talk more. Please comment and stuff. We'll be continuing answering stuff through comments after this as well. But again, thank you for taking the time. Great chatting. And it's always fun to, chat with y'all.
Love
Thanks,
it.
everybody. Appreciate it.